Flames roared up the wheelchair ramp like a fuse, devouring the only safe exit to the house where 11-year-old Lena sat trapped upstairs. Michael Grant, just home from a 48-hour deployment, leapt from his truck as smoke curled into the night sky. His training kicked in, but this time, the fire was personal. And the moment he heard his daughter's terrified voice through the smoke, he knew someone had tried to kill her. Michael Grant had spent the last 23 years charging into burning buildings, coordinating rescue operations, and combing through the charred remains of arson sites in search of answers. But nothing in his long, decorated career with the county fire department prepared him for the sight waiting in his own driveway. The ramp leading up to his front door, the very ramp he had personally designed and built to ensure his daughter Lena could safely enter their home, was engulfed in flames. For a moment, after the grueling 48-hour shift he had just completed, Michael's exhausted brain simply refused to register what his eyes were telling him. Then instinct and training kicked in. He slammed his truck into park and flew out the door, grabbing the fire extinguisher he always kept behind his seat. "Lena," he shouted hoarsely as he raced toward the blaze, the searing heat washing over him like a wave. He could barely make out the silhouette of the ramp as the fire crackled violently, consuming the treated wood he'd used to build it. This wasn't a trash fire or a fallen ember from a nearby grill, this was intentional. His house, his daughter, were under attack. As he fought the flames, a voice called out from the front door, thick with panic. "Michael!" Thank God. It was Tina Morales, Lena's caregiver. Her white hair was wild, her hands trembling on the doorknob. "She's upstairs. I can't carry her, she's trapped." Michael didn't hesitate. With the flames reduced enough to forge a path, he sprinted through the smoke-filled entryway, his lungs burning as he bounded up the stairs 2 at a time. In the second-floor bedroom, his 11-year-old daughter sat frozen in her wheelchair by the window, staring at the fire below with wide, terrified eyes. "Daddy," she whispered as he scooped her up. "Someone did it on purpose. I saw them." Her voice broke something inside him. Michael's protective instincts had always been sharp, but now they exploded into something primal. Someone had set fire to his home, to his daughter's only safe exit route, fully knowing she was inside. Outside, fire trucks wailed closer. As he emerged carrying Lena, their neighbor Erin Daniels pulled up in her red SUV, still in her bunker pants and station boots. "Mike! Is Lena okay?" she shouted, rushing toward them. "We're safe now," he replied, but his voice was raw, shaking with barely contained fury. "Someone torched the ramp. Deliberately." Lena saw it. Erin's jaw tightened. "I'm not surprised," she muttered. "I saw Sandra Kim's Lexus hauling out of here when I turned onto Magnolia Lane. Didn't think much of it, until now." Michael's stomach turned. Sandra Kim, the 63-year-old president of the Magnolia Oaks HOA, had been a thorn in his side since the day construction began on the ramp. She'd called it a visual disgrace, an architectural disruption, and insisted it brought down neighborhood property values. Michael had responded with patience, showing her the permits, the ADA documentation, even offering to plant shrubs and install tasteful railings to make the ramp blend in. But Sandra had only doubled down. "Magnolia Oaks has standards, Mr. Grant," she had snapped during the last HOA meeting. "That ramp doesn't belong here." Now, her hatred had turned criminal. Firefighters worked quickly to soak the last smoldering embers while Erin helped Tina comfort Lena in the living room. Michael stood silently by the scorched ramp, fists clenched. As deputy fire chief, he would normally lead an arson investigation like this, but not this time. Not when the victim was his daughter. "I'm recusing myself," he said curtly when his division's arson unit arrived. "Mike, are you sure?" his deputy asked gently. "We want this done right," Michael replied, his voice like steel. "And I'm not objective." Deputy Nate Wilkins nodded. "We'll take it from here." The investigation began within the hour. The ramp was examined with forensic precision. Fire patterns clearly indicated multiple ignition points. This wasn't just a case of someone tossing a match. Whoever did this had used an accelerant. And sure enough, Tucked behind the hydrangea bushes near the property line, Nate's team found a red plastic gas can. The odor of gasoline was still strong. But the real break came when Josephine Lynn, the retired nurse who lived across the street, waved them over with a grave look on her face. "I have something you'll want to see," she said. Inside her home, Josephine pulled up footage from her security camera, installed last year after a string of package thefts in the neighborhood. The black and white video was as clear as a confession. Sandra Kim, wearing her usual sun hat and gloves, walking up to the ramp with a gas can in one hand and what appeared to be a kitchen lighter in the other. She doused the ramp slowly, checking her watch twice before flicking the lighter. The flames erupted in seconds. And then she walked away, calm, collected, slipping into her silver Lexus and driving off like she'd just watered her garden. "She timed it," Josephine said bitterly, her voice trembling. She knew when Tina would be making Lena's snack in the kitchen. Knew no one would see her. "But my cameras catch everything. That woman has terrorized this neighborhood long enough." The footage, combined with the fingerprints on the gas can and Aaron's eyewitness account of Sandra fleeing the scene, left no room for doubt. Officers confronted Sandra that evening in her perfectly manicured yard. Her reaction was a blend of outrage and denial. "This is absurd," she huffed. "Why would I set a fire? I'm a respected member of this community." But the evidence was overwhelming, and her arrest for felony arson and child endangerment sent shockwaves through Magnolia Oaks. Michael stood beside Lena's bed that night, watching her sleep. Her hands were curled loosely around her favorite stuffed fox. The room smelled faintly of smoke, despite the air purifiers working overtime. He couldn't shake the image of her staring out the window at the flames. Someone had wanted to hurt her. Not just any someone, his neighbor. A woman who sat across from him at HOA meetings. Who smiled politely while hiding seething hatred behind every word. It wasn't just about the ramp. It was about control. About erasing anything she deemed unfit for the picture-perfect image of Magnolia Oaks. But she had underestimated a firefighter's family. The next morning, Lena looked up at him as he brought her breakfast tray. Her voice was quiet. "Dad, am I going to be a target forever? Because I'm different?" Michael swallowed the lump in his throat. "No, sweetheart. What Sandra did was wrong. But she's not the world. And the world is bigger than her small mind." Lena gave him a half-smile. "I'm glad you came home when you did." He kissed her forehead gently. "Me too, baby. Me too." As word spread through the neighborhood, reactions varied. Some neighbors avoided eye contact. Others rang the doorbell with casseroles and trembling apologies. But Michael wasn't focused on social appearances anymore. His daughter was safe. And Sandra Kim, the woman who tried to burn that safety to the ground, was finally facing justice. What she tried to destroy would rise again. Stronger. Safer. And this time, built not just with lumber and bolts, but with the hands and hearts of a community ready to reclaim what it had almost lost. The morning after the fire, the charred remains of the wheelchair ramp stood as both a crime scene and a scar carved into Michael Grant's property, a grim reminder of how close they'd come to losing everything. The smell of gasoline still lingered in the air as contractors cordoned off the blackened boards, and news of Sandra Kim's arrest swept through Magnolia Oaks like a desert windstorm. For years, she had ruled the neighborhood from her pristine porch with a clipboard in one hand and the HOA bylaws in the other, issuing citations for flower beds out of alignment and patio furniture deemed unsightly. Now she was behind bars, facing charges not for some petty neighborhood squabble, but for felony arson and endangering a child. And for the first time since Michael and Lena had moved in, the silence from the neighbors wasn't cold, it was shaken. Erin Daniels stopped by that morning with 2 coffees and a look in her eyes that said she hadn't slept either. "You okay?" she asked, handing him the cup. Michael didn't answer right away. He was watching Lena through the window. She was sitting in the living room with Tina, sketching something on a pad of paper. "She's acting brave," he finally said. "But I can see it, she's scared now, even here." Erin nodded. "That's not something you fix overnight. By noon, a small group of residents had gathered on Michael's front lawn, not reporters or officials, but neighbors. Ordinary people who had stayed quiet for too long. Some brought food, others brought tools. But what surprised Michael most was who walked up last, Douglas Reed, the HOA's vice president. He was holding a folded document and looked like a man who had just woken up from a long, uncomfortable dream. "We're holding an emergency vote tonight," Douglas said, not quite meeting Michael's eyes. "She's out. Sandra." "The board agrees unanimously." Michael said nothing, but his nod was enough. That evening, the Magnolia Oaks HOA held its first truly honest meeting. Gone were the stiff, performative routines of past gatherings. Douglas opened the floor, and for the first time, people spoke freely. They spoke about Sandra's bullying, the rules she twisted, the way she'd enforced her version of neighborhood integrity with an iron fist wrapped in fake politeness. And when the vote came, it wasn't close. Sandra Kim was removed as president effective immediately. Then Douglas read a prepared apology, one the board had written collectively. "To the Grant family, we failed you. We allowed one person's obsession with control to overshadow our duty as neighbors and human beings. We are deeply sorry." In the days that followed, a shift began, small at first, but real. Retired contractor Bill Evans offered to oversee the rebuild of the ramp. Local firefighter crews from Aaron Station volunteered labor. A landscaping company donated native plants to border the structure. And most touching of all, a 6th grade teacher at Lena's school collected cards from her classmates, dozens of colorful, messy notes filled with kind words and drawings of ramps with flowers and sunshine. Lena read each one with quiet wonder, her confidence returning in increments. Michael was careful not to rush her healing. He arranged therapy sessions with a counselor who specialized in trauma recovery for children with disabilities. And when Lena timidly asked if she could help design the new ramp, he smiled. "It's your ramp, kiddo. You tell me what it needs." She didn't want it to look like something temporary. "It should be part of the house," she said. "Not just stuck on." So together, they picked out materials: composite decking with built-in traction, low-slope rails with integrated LED lighting, and a side planter box for herbs and flowers. The new ramp wasn't just safer. It was beautiful. And it was hers. As the ramp took shape, Lena's spirit began to rise. But something else sparked too, a desire to understand what had happened and to use it for something good. "People don't know how to help someone in a wheelchair during a fire," she said one night over dinner. What if it had been Tina alone? That question led to research. Then to writing. Then to planning a school presentation. Michael watched her transform from a shaken survivor to a confident speaker as she delivered a fire safety talk at her school titled "Wheels on Fire: Staying Safe When You Can't Run." She included evacuation plans, tips for caregivers, and even demonstrated a fire-resistant lap blanket she'd helped design using materials Aaron brought from the station. The school was so impressed they asked her to present again during Safety Week. Local media covered the event. A photo of Lena in her wheelchair holding a fire extinguisher made the front page of the county's lifestyle section. The headline read, "From Victim to Leader, Young Girl Turns Trauma into Teaching Moment." The story caught the attention of the county's emergency management director, who invited Lena to join a youth advisory panel focused on inclusive disaster planning. At 11 years old, she became the youngest voice in the room, one that everyone listened to. Meanwhile, the legal case against Sandra Kim moved forward. Her defense, centered around her concern for fire safety due to the wooden ramp, collapsed almost immediately under cross-examination. So concerned, the prosecutor noted that she chose to pour gasoline on it and light a match. The jury was unconvinced. Sandra was found guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 7 years in prison, with no chance of early parole for the first 4. She was also permanently banned from serving on any HOA board in the state of California. Her carefully crafted reputation, the power she'd wielded through real estate and regulation, crumbled like wet paper. Her brokerage lost clients. Her family distanced themselves. Her name, once spoken with a sort of cautious respect in Magnolia Oaks, became a cautionary tale. But even after the trial, one final chapter remained. Sandra, through her attorney, offered a civil settlement, a six-figure payment to the Grants in exchange for closing the matter quietly. Michael considered it, but Lena had her own thoughts. "If we take the money," she said one night, her tone unusually serious, "people will think we were just looking for a payout." She hurt me. Hurt all of us. People should know. So it doesn't happen to the next kid. And just like she had in the fire, Lena saw more clearly than anyone. They refused the settlement. The civil case went public. Sandra was ordered not only to pay damages but to issue a full public apology and participate in community education about the rights of individuals with disabilities. Her first appearance, filmed for use in school programs, was stiff and awkward, but it marked the beginning of a different kind of sentence. Back on Magnolia Lane, things were changing. New welcome signs were installed at the neighborhood entrances. Below the name Magnolia Oaks, a new tagline appeared, "An accessible community." For Michael, who had once considered moving away after the fire, it felt like the final word in a fight he hadn't started, but had finished on his own terms. The ramp now glowed softly at night, lights twinkling along the railing. Lena sometimes sat outside with Tina, watching the stars, her voice returning to its usual playful brightness. "Dad," she said one night, "I think the ramp makes our house look even better." He looked at her, at the light catching her cheeks, at the strength in her gaze. "You make the whole block better," he replied. And for the first time since the fire, she laughed. Loud and free. A sound that told him they were home, not just in a house, but in a community that had finally remembered what that word was supposed to mean. The night air on Magnolia Lane had changed. Where silence once stretched cold and cautious between manicured hedges and trimmed lawns, there was now conversation, warm, honest, human. And beneath the soft glow of the new ramp lights, Lena Grant sat cross-legged on the wooden platform she had helped design, teaching her neighbor's toddler how to play Go Fish. The fire that had nearly destroyed her confidence had ignited something else entirely: community. 3 months had passed since Sandra Kim's conviction, and Michael Grant still found himself waking in the middle of the night, not from fear, but from disbelief that it had all happened. That the woman who once ran the HOA with an iron grip was now serving a 7-year sentence. That the same neighbors who once averted their eyes now stopped by with soup, with questions, with tools, with kindness. The transformation wasn't loud or dramatic, but it was real. It began with the bylaws. Douglas Reed, now acting president of the HOA, had taken Lena's civil testimony seriously. He convened a task force of homeowners, including 2 retired lawyers, a local ADA coordinator, and Josephine Lynn, to review every line of the HOA's governing documents. What emerged from the late-night kitchen meetings was a new accessibility charter. It codified the right of all residents to make necessary disability accommodations without fear of retaliation or aesthetic judgment. It required that HOA disputes regarding accessibility be mediated through a neutral third party. And it mandated that HOA board members undergo annual training on federal disability law. The changes passed with an overwhelming majority, and for the first time in years, Magnolia Oaks felt like it belonged to its people, not to a single person's rigid vision. But more than policies changed. So did people. Josephine Lynn hosted the neighborhood's first Accessibility Day in the community park, inviting vendors who specialized in home modifications, physical therapy, equipment, sensory-friendly design, and mobility aids. There were booths for hearing-impaired services, resources for aging-in-place renovations, even a sensory-friendly play zone for kids on the autism spectrum. The turnout exceeded every expectation. Local media covered the event. The mayor issued a certificate of recognition. And a plaque near the welcome gate now read, "Magnolia Oaks, a community for all." For Lena, this wasn't just about ramps or rules, it was about voice. She had found hers, and she wasn't giving it up. The Advisory Council on Emergency Preparedness brought her in as a permanent youth member. She helped develop a checklist for families with mobility needs during wildfires and power outages. Her teacher submitted her work to a national contest on community leadership, and Lena placed third, beating out high schoolers twice her age. Her face, beaming with pride, appeared on the local news again under the headline, 11-year-old turns tragedy into trailblazing advocacy. And then, 3 years after the night her world caught fire, Michael received a letter, not from a lawyer, not from a board, but directly from Sandra Kim. It was brief, formal, but unmistakably human. I would like to request a meeting. I owe you an apology, not through attorneys, but in person. I understand if you refuse. Michael sat with the letter for days before speaking to Lena about it. She wants to talk. Just me, not you, he said gently. Lena looked up from the kitchen table, her pencil pausing mid-doodle. What do you think she wants to say? I don't know, Michael replied. Maybe she's trying to make peace with herself. Lena thought for a long moment. You can go, she said. But if she asks if I forgive her, don't answer for me. Michael nodded, proud of the calm steel in her voice. He met Sandra at a small community center where she now volunteered once a week as part of her sentencing agreement. She looked different, thinner, older, her designer polish long. Faded. But her eyes held something new, clarity. I was wrong, she said simply. Not just about the ramp. About everything. I let my obsession with perfection become cruelty. I didn't see your daughter as a person. I saw her as a problem. Michael didn't let her off the hook. You endangered a child's life. That's not just misjudgment. That's malice. Sandra nodded, tears in her eyes. I know. I know I can't undo it. But I'm trying to change how I move forward. I speak at HOAs now. Schools. I tell them what happens when pride becomes prejudice. The conversation wasn't easy. It wasn't meant to be. But when Michael left the room, he carried something surprising, not forgiveness, but a sliver of hope that even hardened hearts could crack open if the light was strong enough. A month later, Sandra spoke at a public event hosted at the county library. It was a panel on inclusion in residential communities, and Lena sat quietly in the second row. Sandra didn't notice her at first. She spoke with restraint and humility, detailing how unchecked authority, unspoken biases, and misplaced priorities had led her to a decision that nearly took a child's life. It was about control, she said. And control is a poor substitute for compassion. When the session ended, Lena rolled forward, her face calm. The ramp you burned down was actually kind of ugly, she said. This one's way better. Sandra blinked, then laughed, short, startled. I've seen photos. It is better. Bad things sometimes lead to good things, Lena continued, her voice steady. But that doesn't make the bad thing okay. No, Sandra replied softly. It doesn't. The room was quiet. The moment wasn't about closure, it was about acknowledgement. Later, in the car, Lena turned to her father. Do you think she really changed, or just learned how to sound sorry? Michael considered the question carefully. Maybe both. People are complicated. But I think she's trying. Lena nodded, then smiled slightly. I'm glad we didn't leave. So was he. The ramp now stood not just as an entryway, but as a symbol, a sleek, fire-resistant structure with soft lighting, graceful lines, and handrails carved with Lena's favorite patterns. Children played on the lawn beside it. Neighbors gathered near it. And every time someone walked up it, they weren't just entering a house. They were stepping into a new chapter of Magnolia Oaks, one shaped by justice, strengthened by resilience, and lit by the quiet brilliance of an 11-year-old girl who refused to be a victim. The story of Michael and Lena Grant is more than just a tale of arson, injustice, and accountability. It is a reminder that even in the darkest moments, when trust is betrayed and lives are put at risk, hope can take root. And when it does, it doesn't just heal wounds, it transforms entire communities. What happened on Magnolia Lane revealed a hard truth: unchecked authority, when fueled by prejudice, can become dangerous. Sandra Kim used her position not to protect the neighborhood but to enforce her own narrow view of what belonged. In her quest for order, she lost sight of compassion and nearly cost a child her life. But this story didn't end in destruction, it ignited change. Because of Lena's courage and Michael's quiet strength, a once rigid, judgmental community evolved into one that valued inclusion, accessibility, and empathy. The real lesson here is this: we all have a role in shaping the communities we live in. Whether you're a parent, a neighbor, a teacher, or simply someone who notices when something isn't right, your voice matters. Silence in the face of wrongdoing, even when it feels easier, enables the harm to continue. But one act of bravery, one refusal to stay quiet, can ripple outward in ways we never expect. Lena taught us that even children, especially children, can lead. Her choice to speak up instead of settle, to educate instead of resent, helped transform hearts and policies alike. Her fire safety advocacy didn't just start conversations, it changed laws, inspired events, and gave others the courage to stand up for themselves too. So here's our message to you: don't underestimate the impact of your actions. Speak when it's uncomfortable. Stand up when it's unpopular. Defend what is right, even if it makes you a target. Because communities don't become better places by accident, they become better because someone decided they were worth fighting for. And to our listeners and supporters here at Us, Justice Stories, thank you for being part of this journey. Your continued support helps shine a light on everyday injustices and gives voice to those who deserve to be heard. Every like, every share, every comment fuels our mission to bring truth, healing, and justice to light. We hope this story reminded you of the power of integrity, the strength of family, and the resilience of the human spirit. If it moved you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this message with someone who might need to hear it. Until next time, stay aware, stay kind, and never stop believing in justice.